Davis steps under center. Gibson and McClendon behind him. Davis with motion by Richard. Will give the ball to McClendon. He leaps. Oh, he doesn't get in. He fumbled the football. Carolina holds. The game is over. And Carolina has won the game.
Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolford again. Wolford the other way. At the 30, the 40. Wolford to midfield. Miles Wolford with the pick. The heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory.
Left side of the line. Hood standing to Williams' right. Williams gonna throw. One-on-one. Davis has it. Touchdown. Carolina wins. Carolina is the Coastal Division champion. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio is at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me? Connor Barth for the possible win. Snap, spot, kick away, high enough, long enough. It's good! It's good! Carolina has won the game on a 42-yard field goal by freshman Connor Barth. Good gosh, dirty!
This is the Heel Tough Blog Podcast.
Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. Anthony Pagnotta with you as always. Josh Marlowe back with us. That's right. We're moving on from the trenches, but he is still here to talk about these guys on this Tar Heel roster here in 2021. And we're talking about a linebacker group that I think with, some of the young guys that Carolina has on the defensive line, some of the young mixed with the veteran guys that you have on the back end that has that as one of the better units really in the ACC, maybe in the entire country, especially at cornerback. Yeah. This is a group that kind of gets forgotten about a little bit. The inside linebacker group, it's a very talented one. You've got a veteran guy that leads the group. You've got a guy that had his first career start at the end of last year that's going to take over a starting role that a lot of people expect big things from. And then there are some freshmen that come in that are going to really make some waves early on the depth chart if they play anything like they did in that spring game. And there's a couple other guys that we're going to touch on here. But, yeah, we got to start with the guy that's going to be heading to ACC Media Days for the Tar Heels. He is the leader of the linebacking core and really probably the leader of the defense this year with Chad Surratt moving on. And that is Jeremiah Gemmel, the man in the middle for the Tar Heels, senior who, again, coming off another productive season for Carolina. 78 total tackles finished, only behind Chad Surratt a year ago. 6 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, also had 2 interceptions and 4 pass deflections. And while he may not have been great all the time in coverage, he still found a way to pull down those 2 interceptions. And I think he's a guy that, again, he's probably not going to do anything spectacularly, but he's a guy that is going to probably make it to the NFL because he doesn't do anything bad. He does everything good.
He is the embodiment of what you want in a linebacker. See ball, find the ball, make a play on the ball. His instincts are off the charts. That's pretty much how he makes his plays, is off of his instincts. Now, granted, he's a film junkie. He's pretty much the most well-prepared player on that defense.
Oh, he's as cerebral as it gets, man.
On the entire defense. But, he's come a long ways from when we did the live show out at Charlotte 2 years ago. We worried about him being able to hold up as a guy in pass coverage. He's come a long way in the 2 years since
then. Yeah, we quickly forgot about him when they said, hey, we're going to be starting this converted linebacker named Chad Surratt or this converted quarterback at linebacker and Chad Surratt. We don't want to relive probably some of the comments that we made.
That was a rough day, but Jeremiah Gemmel is what you want in a leader on your defense. He's, in my opinion, a poor man's Luke Kuechly. Everyone loves him. Everyone respects him. He does everything the right way. You hear him talk, on and off the field. He's just a football guy. And he's going to have a really big season for a defense that's poised to take a step in the right direction.
Yeah, especially with Chad Surratt gone. Chad Surratt was that other guy that really just found the football. With him not there, you are going to have another guy that we're going to talk about here in a minute, but you would expect that Gimmel will probably, shoulder a little bit more of the load, especially early on for the Tar Heels. And there's a lot to be excited about with him. There's just as much to be excited about with Eugene Asante, who comes in, of course, started the game in the Orange Bowl and looked really, really good.
Yeah.
Look, you lose Chaz Surratt, and, he went in the third round of the draft. Former quarterback, as we mentioned, that converted a linebacker for his final 2 seasons and played really, really well. Dude, Eugene Asante, if he can live up to the expectations, he might be better than Chaz Surratt at the end of the season.
Not to take anything away from Chaz, when Eugene Asante stepped on the field in the Orange Bowl, you didn't notice that Chaz Surratt wasn't on the field. That's how good he was. And part of that's because he's a natural linebacker. What Chaz Surratt did as a converted quarterback was unheard of, and was really, Carolina was playing with house money, and they were able to get a royal flush with that guy. Eugene Asante is everything that Jay Bateman loves him. He just spoke, so highly of him leading up to the Orange Bowl, after the Orange Bowl, and we all left that game wondering, how did this guy not get on the field more? Well, you had 2 pretty much all ACC caliber linebackers ahead of him. Chaz Surratt's gone. Eugene Asante, it would not surprise me if he has triple digit in terms of tackles this season. If he doesn't become an all ACC player, Phil Steele had Ray Vohasek as a third-team All-American. Eugene Asante might be the guy that could put his name in that conversation if he has the kind of season we think he can have.
Yeah, and look, man, Phil Steele is as well-respected as it gets. By the time this podcast comes out, we will have talked to Phil Steele, so you'll have that, and you can go back and listen to that edition of the podcast and check that out. I agree with you. I think this guy is definitely at least a sleeper for first-team All-ACC. He is a tremendous linebacker. Look, last year, the 2 games that he played the most significant snaps in were the game against Texas A&M, where he had 10 total tackles, and the game against Virginia Tech, where he had 7 total tackles. He is going to make a huge impact for this defense. And here's the other thing. Now, we didn't see it a lot from Chaz Surratt because the way that they schemed him and how good of a pass rusher he was, they used him in a little bit of a different way. This guy is... he is going to be a force for you as well in coverage. Look, there will be guys that will still be able to take advantage of him at times, but I feel like when he's matched up against a guy like we saw last year in the Boston College game, Hunter Long really gave Carolina fits. Eugene Asante's athletic enough to where he will be able to hold his own in coverage. And I think the biggest thing that this does, we talked about it so much late last year, especially when we got, into those later games, primarily that game against Wake Forest. This is going to take a lot of pressure off of Jeremiah Gimmel dropping into coverage. Eugene Asante was a guy that when he was recruited out of high school, we knew that this was in his skill set. And the guys that are behind him on the depth chart, the true freshmen that we're going to talk about here in a minute, those guys, they fit that mold as well. But this was another guy that was looked at as sort of that, maybe not on the same level, but fit that Isaiah Simmons-like role that you're looking for your linebackers to sort of fit these days, especially in the type of scheme that he runs. I think there's just so many different things that Asante is going to be able to bring to this linebacking core this year.
He's versatile, and he gives you flashbacks to the linebacking core Carolina had when Butch Davis was here, a guy that could make plays in all different varieties, which Carolina hasn't really had that since Butch Davis left town. You've had some good linebackers, but you haven't had those kind of versatile guys that were good in the run game, good in the pass game, down the field, and in the middle field, taking away, a tight end route or something like that. He gives you that despite just being 6 foot, 220 pounds, but that's where his instincts and his ability to recover and everything like that and to make plays on the football really show up, and I think that'll be an added element, keeping Jeremiah Gimmel in the box as opposed to having him down the field. I think it'll make this defense a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think, Gimmel will probably be the guy that will sort of fill that role that Chaz Surratt did a year ago. Don't know if he's going to be as successful in the role when it comes to blitzing and being able to get after the quarterback, but I think that fits him a lot better than having to consistently drop into or constantly drop into coverage.
I agree with you.
And at times getting exposed. You look at the guys behind. Eugene Asante is a sideline-to-sideline linebacker, which is what Carolina wants from their linebackers. So are the two guys that are behind them, the guys that really, really looked great in the game, in the spring game, and I think really surprised a lot of people with how far ahead of the curve they looked already. Power Eccles, Ra Dilworth. I mean, Ra Dilworth was the guy that everybody was talking about, and rightfully so. I mean, he can fly around. Now, he's got to put on weight at 6'1.5", 205. He's small for a linebacker, but I mean, the talent level here and the pure skills are just off the charts for him. But I'm going to tell you, dude, Power Eccles, he was not being talked about as much as Dilworth. He is going to be a hell of a player, man. I loved him in high school. He was probably the best player on that field defensively for Carolina in that spring game.
Yeah, there's a lot of reason to be excited about these two guys because they're the face and the future of your defense on the linebacker position, and they are going to be fun to watch. As you mentioned, they can get sideline to sideline and make plays. They're not afraid to help in the run game. They can get down the field and help you in the passing game as well and make plays there. And they're the new age linebacker. And they fit what Jay Bateman wants to do with his linebackers. He wants guys that can make plays all over the field. Those guys can do that. I think Power Eccles is probably set up to be more of an impact player this year as a freshman as opposed to Ra Dilworth. The best thing is they both got hell of great names. And they're, if there's guys that are going to benefit from NIL, these guys will benefit to be able to market themselves with a name like Power and then the nickname like Ra. These guys are going to make plays on and off the field, but really excited to see what they can do in a live game setting because the spring game was just a taste. Now we want to see what they can do. I feel like they're going to be on the field at Virginia Tech in some capacity because you'll learn pretty soon if you can trust them or not. I think these guys are ready to make impact plays as freshmen.
Yeah, I don't know how much we're going to see of them, though, because Mack Brown even said it in the spring. There are a lot of positions they're going to rotate. That's probably the one position they're still not going to rotate at a ton. They could, but they are young guys that, both guys probably need to put on a little bit of size. Maybe not Eccles, because I think he's right around that same area as Asante, but Dilworth definitely does. It'll be interesting, though, because I'm going to be honest with you. It's going to be really hard to keep that talent off the field because those guys fit Jay Bateman's defense about as well as any of the. We talk about some of the defensive linemen that fit the defense. These guys literally fit this defense like a glove. These are the perfect players to put in the middle of your defense. And at this point, look, they were battling a guy. We're talking about him here. They were battling a guy in Cedric Gray who, came in, was a valuable special teams player a year ago and was in the system, looked like, especially with Kadri Jackson leaving, he was set to take on a bigger role. And honestly, with Kadri Jackson, part of the reason that I think he ended up entering the transfer portal was he saw the two guys that were behind him. He knew that these guys are going to pass me sooner rather than later. I'm a good player. These guys have chances to be some of the best players in the ACC, maybe even in the country, on the defensive side of the football going forward. They've done, great stuff. And, Cedric Gray's another guy that provides some depth for you. He's athletic, can cover a lot of space. And the best thing about him, another guy that, he played wide receiver in high school. He can drop back into coverage and do some things for you as well. The one area where he might be able to have a little bit of an advantage over some of these guys is Mack Brown's talked about it. We'll talk about it more when we go into the secondary guys. Mack Brown's looking for guys that can make plays and help turn the football over because that's still an area where Carolina's lacking. Are those game-changing plays on the defensive side of the football. Cedric Gray has the ability to go up and catch the football in coverage. He could definitely be a guy to keep an eye on from that group, but we'll see. I just, from his comments, I don't know how much rotation there's going to be because you've got a guy in Gimmel who's played a lot. You'd love to keep that veteran presence there. And, same thing with Asante. And I think even though they're talented, this is the one spot where you look at the depth here. And to me, there is a clear drop-off point from Gimmel and Asante down to Eccles and Dilworth. There's
only because of experience, though. The talent of Eccles and Dilworth, I think, exceeds the talent of Gimmel and Asante, but they don't have the experience at the level that those two guys have. If you give them the reps, and you can rotate them, I think it elevates your defense in a way that right now you're not elevated to, because those guys are always on the field. And, we talked about it. We talked about expanding the playoff, stuff like that. If they're on the field 90 to 100 snaps, they're going to be worn down at certain points in the season where you need those guys fresh. It would be behoove of Jay Bateman to give Dilworth and Eccles snaps when he can.
We'll see. I think there's a chance that they could. There are some games early in the year for sure. I mean, that game against Georgia State's probably one that you look at and you think they could get in early. There's a game later in the season against Wofford where they could definitely get some playing time, but we'll just have to see. It feels like they're still trying to look at keeping their two main guys on the field, but these guys are so talented that you really just never know. Believe it or not, this is a smaller group, which would make sense because, with the inside linebackers, you got two guys on the field at a time. There'll be sometimes you'll even just go one guy because you're putting an extra defensive back out there. So the depth here doesn't have to be as deep as some of the other positions. I still think this is one of those areas where they're probably going to look to keep adding some guys in the recruiting classes going forward.
Absolutely.
But it's also one of those position groups that, let's be honest, it's not valued in football as much as it used to be. It stinks because there are some really talented guys, some really exciting guys to watch here. But, look at the NFL ranks. When was the last time that you saw an interior linebacker go in the first round? If they did, inside the top 15. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's rare. Most of the time, you get like 10 guys that may get selected in the draft at inside linebacker. So that's just the point you've kind of gotten to. Some of the other guys that will be on the roster this year that are walk-ons, you've got sophomore Jake Harkleroad, who looks really good in the reps that he saw in the spring game. Again, can't tell a ton from the spring game, but especially with some of these walk-on guys, it's always nice to see some of those guys stand out just in case it got to that point on the depth chart. And let's be honest, the linebacker core, if you're going to get a walk-on, that could be your area. We've had Jeff Schottmer, we've had Cole Holcomb that have come out of there and been pretty successful. Harkleroad's a pretty solid player that you just never know. Jalen Brooks, a redshirt freshman that was a part of the program a year ago, will also be back. And then you have a guy coming in his first year with the program, Gibson McRae, who comes from Pinecrest High School in Pinehurst, North Carolina, will also be joining the group for the fall. So that wraps up for this edition of the position previews here. We are on the doorstep. Final edition of the defensive side of the football will be the next edition. We'll talk about the defensive backs. So you have both the corners and safeties in there. And then we'll wrap it all up with the special teams unit, one that Mac Brown is saying he wants to see some improvement out of this year and wants to see them help this team win games. So there'll be some interesting stuff in both of those as well. And you can head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com, check out all of the editions of the position previews on there. We've got the breakdowns for you that you want. We go even more in depth on the website when we break down these guys. So all these guys that we just talked about here, we break them down even more in the articles on the website. So make sure you go over and check those out right now. We've had you covered with a bunch of recruiting stuff as well on the football side of things. Carolina had a big month of June hosting a bunch of guys. Also, last weekend of July is going to be big for Carolina as well. They've got some guys that have committed in between there, some big-time targets, some guys that Carolina has landed. So go check all of that out over on the website. We've got you covered with everything Tar Heel football recruiting-wise over there. And then we're getting into that time of the year where we're going to start putting out those fun articles that we like to do, top camp battles before we get into fall camp. And then we get the ones with the breakout players that we always like to do. And bold predictions. That was the one I couldn't think of for a while there. But bold predictions, we always put those ones out too. We are really excited to do that this year, especially because I think the bold predictions could get pretty bold this year.
Yeah.
So we are really excited that those are coming up. Make sure you keep an eye on the website for that. And make sure you're looking at all the basketball content we got on there as well. Bunch of recruiting stuff there, bunch of transfer portal stuff there as well. Carolina has landed Jalen Washington as well as, did I pronounce the name wrong there?
No, you said it right.
No, okay. You looked up, so I was like, wait a second. I've read these over so many times today because we're filming a bunch here in a row that I thought maybe. And then you have Dawson Garcia as well, the transfer that is coming in. He's got all that stuff on the website for you as well. Same thing. Carolina's still pursuing guys on the recruiting trail. Jaden Bradley is the guy that leads that group. He'll have you covered through all of that. And then right up until we get to the start of the season, which was revealed earlier this month. You guys can go back, check out the article that's written about the non-conference schedule that has been released. The ACC schedule may be released around November 8th at this point. We'll have to wait and see, though. But hopefully we'll be getting that soon. And when that comes out, we'll have you covered on that front as well. Josh will be locking it down on the basketball side of things while I have it locked down on the football side of things. So, same thing as we always tell you on the website. Top of the page, you got the links to both podcasts. You can click on the tabs at the top. Heel Tough Blog podcast is up there right next to it. The Four Corners podcast, that's where you can listen to the podcast. You can also do it on any of your major podcasting sites, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn. Also got it on the Odyssey app now, so you guys can check all of that out. And make sure when you do, you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of the editions. And for the people watching, the way that you subscribe to the podcast is by liking and following the Facebook page. That's basically subscribing so that you get everything right on your timeline. All of these video podcasts, all of the regular editions of the podcast if you don't want to watch the video edition, and you can also check out all the articles there as well. It's all in one place on that Facebook page, so make sure you hit that like at the top of the page, and it will automatically allow you to follow as well. We would greatly appreciate that. Follow us social media at HTB Josh for him, at HTB Anthony for me, and at Heel Tough Blog for the official blog account on Twitter. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast. I want to thank Josh for hosting with me. I want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.